In this video, we are going to explain the rules and show you how to play Through the Ages on Board Game Arena, where it plays from 2 to 4 players. To be clear, this is the online implementation of the original version of Through the Ages published in 2006, not a new story of civilization published in 2015. When hosting a table, you can choose between playing the simple game, the advanced game, and the complete game. We will play the complete game in this video, but we will touch on the rule differences between all three settings. With that, let's get started. In Through the Ages, players take turns in clockwise order, performing up to the number of civil and military actions permitted by their government. Players will earn culture points from the effects of various cards they play into their areas. The game spans 2 ages in the simple game, 3 ages in the advanced game, and 4 ages in the complete game. In all cases, the game end is triggered when all civil cards of the final age have been placed on the central card row. From there, players continue taking turns until all players have taken the same number of turns. When the game ends, whoever has the most culture points wins. Before going over the rules, let's take a look at the interface. Firstly, this star shows how many culture points a player has, while this symbol here, however, shows how much culture a player gains each turn. Different cards in your play area may generate culture for you at the end of each of your turns, and the sum of those would be displayed here. The only limitation is the maximum amount of culture a player can gain at the end of their turn is 30. Next, this shows how much science you currently possess, while this number shows how much science you gain each turn. Again, this maxes out at plus 30 science per turn, but the maximum amount of science a player can possess at one time is 40. We can see that all players begin the game with one philosophy building that produces 1 science per turn. As a result, this number begins at 1. This shows how many happy faces you have, while this shows how many discontent workers there are in your play area. A player may never have less than 0 happy faces and never more than 8. Up here is your current military strength, and we can see all players start with 1 military. Each player can have a maximum military strength of 60 at any time during the game. Lastly, these symbols show how much food and resources you have, while this shows how many unused workers you have. We can see that all players start with 1 unused worker. The only other game information I want to note at this time is the number of cards remaining in the current age is shown up here. All 3 game settings always start in Age A Antiquity, and there are no military cards corresponding to that age, as we can see here. The first turn of the game plays differently than all the other turns. During the first turn, players are given a number of civil actions equal to their position in turn order, which can only be used to take cards from the card row. As a result, we can see that I have 1 civil action because I am the first player, but my opponent will get 2 civil actions because he's second in turn order. If we were playing with 3 or 4 players, they would get 3 and 4 civil actions respectively. When taking a card from the card row, it will cost as many civil actions as the number of circles below it. For instance, we can see that these cards each cost 1 civil action, while these right here cost 2 civil actions, and these on the far right cost 3 civil actions each. Since I only have 1 civil action, I can only choose to take one of these cards over here. I'm going to take this one by clicking on it, and now that I am out of civil actions, I will click Pass. I also want to point out that we can see my buildings produced resources, and I gain the corresponding science. We will go into more detail about production next turn. Now my opponent gets to use 2 civil actions because he is the second player in turn order, so he could take either 2 cards costing 1 each or 1 card costing 2. Yellow cards like the one I took here have a one-time use effect, but they cannot be played the same turn you take them from the card row. When you take a yellow card from the card row, it is added to your hand like you can see here. You can always see how many civil and military cards each player is holding in their hands in the game information box. Leaders are green cards like these that give your civilization a special ability as long as they are in play. When you take a leader from the card row, it goes to your hand just like a yellow card, but each player can only ever take 1 leader from each age of the game. For example, if I took Moses here, I would not be able to take Aristotle later because they are both from Age A. In this case, you would still be able to take an Age 1 leader later on, however, since Age 1 is a different age. Wonders are purple cards that go directly into your play area when you take them. They do not go to your hand. They need to be built before they provide their indicated effect to their owner, which we will explain later. Each player may only have 1 incomplete wonder in their play area at any time, so in order to take another one from the card row, they must finish building the one they have in front of them. Also, after completing a wonder, all future wonders you take from the card row cost 1 additional civil action for each wonder you have completed. For instance, if I had completed a wonder in my area and I wanted to take this one from the card row, it would cost me 3 civil actions because it would normally cost 2 based on its position, but I must add 1 for the wonder I have completed. If I had completed 2 wonders, it would cost me 4 civil actions, and so on. My opponent is going to take that wonder, and you can see it goes right to his play area and not to his hand. For all card types, even those that start in your play area, you can always mouse over them to get a description of what they do. When my opponent passes, the main game will begin. From now on, at the beginning of each player's turn, a number of cards will be discarded from the leftmost spaces of the card row based on the player count. In a 2-player game, we can see that it is the first 3 spaces that will be discarded, but in a 3-player game, it is the first 2 spaces, while in a 4-player game, it is the first space only. In all cases, any discarded cards are removed from the game and the card row is refilled using cards from the current age. For the first player's turn only, the card row is refilled using cards from Age A Antiquity. We can see that all the new cards that came into play here are from Age A. On all future turns, however, the card row will be refilled with cards from Age 1, even if there are still unplayed cards from Antiquity remaining. In the Advanced and Complete games, the first thing a player can do during their turn is to perform one political action. Since we did not draw any military cards during Antiquity, we will not do anything here for now, but we will explain some options next turn. From now on, we will draw military cards at the end of each of our turns. No military cards are drawn in the simple game though, so players do not have the option to perform a political action. Instead, from the 3rd round on, at the beginning of each round in the simple game, one of these event cards will be revealed and all players will apply its effect. Events work differently in the Advanced and Complete games, however, and we will go into detail on how they work shortly. During all remaining turns of the game, each player gets as many civil and military actions as indicated by his or her government. We can see all players begin the game under Despotism, which gives 4 civil actions and 2 military actions. As we did in the first turn, we may use any number of our civil actions to take cards from the card row following the same rules. One thing to note about taking cards is each player's civil card hand size is limited to the number of civil actions he or she has. As a result, right now I can have a maximum of 4 civil cards in my hand because I have 4 civil actions. If I already had 4 in my hand, however, I would not be able to take any more from the card row. In addition to taking cards, there are several other actions a player can perform at a cost of 1 civil action each. The first is to increase their population. These yellow circles represent potential increases to your population. The cost of increasing your population is always 1 more food than this number shown to the left of your rightmost yellow token. In this case, we can see that this number is a 1, so increasing my population would cost me 2 food. Once I have added both of these yellow tokens to my civilization, however, we can see that the cost of adding these 4 tokens will be 3 food each, while these will be 4 food each, and these on the far left will cost 7 food each. To increase your population, you click the Increase Population button up here and pay the corresponding food. We can see that I have 2 food, so I am able to increase my population at this time. The new worker is removed from this bar down here and added to my unused worker pool in my game information box. Another possible action is to build a structure. To build a structure, click on the structure you wish to build, and then click Build. The cost of the structure in resources is shown on its left side, so we can see that both of these cost 2 resources to build, while these 2 cost 3 resources each. Since I only had 2 resources, I would not have been able to build either of these at this time. It is important to note that there is a distinction between mines and farms, urban buildings, and military units. Mines and farms are these brownish ones here, while urban buildings are gray in color. Military technologies are always red, however. There is no limit to the number of mines, farms, or military a player can build, but you are limited by your government in the amount of each urban building type you can have at one time. For instance, I now have 3 bronze mines represented by these 3 yellow circles. If I wanted to build another bronze next turn, I would be able to do that. We can see on my government, though, that there is a 2 in this gray arrow symbol on its bottom right corner. This means for each urban building type, I can build a maximum of 2 structures. We can see I already have 1 philosophy building, so until I change my government, I would only be able to build 1 more. I could have 2 philosophy and 2 religion buildings at the same time, however, just not 3 of either of them. Another option is to destroy a building, mine, or farm. To do this, just click the structure you wish to destroy, and then click Destroy. When you do, a yellow circle from it is added back to your unused worker pool. Next, you could play a yellow card from your hand by clicking on it. Remember, you cannot play a yellow card the same turn you take it from the card row. When you play a yellow card, you resolve its effect. For instance, we can see that this one will give me 1 science, so when I click it, I gain 1 science. Now that I have used all my civil actions, it is time for me to click Pass. When a player passes, their cards in play will produce based on the number of yellow circles present on each of them. We can see that there are 2 yellow circles here, so we know that I will produce 2 food. Because there are also 2 yellow circles in this bronze mine, I will also produce 2 resources here. These blue tokens from this bank can represent both food and resources, it just depends which space they are placed on. Lastly, we see that because I make 1 science per turn from this philosophy building, I will gain 1 science. I want to point out that I still have unused military actions. When a player has unused military actions in the advanced and complete games, they will draw as many military cards as their number of unused military actions, up to a maximum of 3 draws. In our case, we can see I have 2 unused military actions, so I will draw 2 military cards. If later on I ended a turn with 4 unused military actions, however, I would only draw 3 military cards, since that is the maximum amount a player can draw at the end of their turn. My opponent will now demonstrate the other possible civil actions you can take during your turn. Firstly, you can play a leader, so he is going to take one from the card row for 1 civil action, and then play it for another. When a player puts a leader into play, that player gains the leader's effect. You can only ever have 1 leader in your play area though, so if you ever put a leader into play when you already have one, the one you played previously will be discarded. Next, you can build a stage of a wonder you have in play. You must always build each stage of the wonder in order from left to right by paying its corresponding cost in resources. We can see the first stage of this one costs 1 resource, so we can build it by clicking on the wonder. When you build a stage of a wonder, one of your blue tokens is placed on it to show how many stages are complete. When all stages of a wonder are complete, all blue tokens on it are returned to your bank, and you gain the wonder's effect. You can build multiple stages of the same wonder during a turn, but building each stage costs 1 civil action. This covers all of the civil actions we will go over at this time. There are 2 more, however, that we will explain a bit later in the video. Now we will go over a few possible military actions. The first is to build a military unit. It works the same as building a structure, it just costs a military action instead of a civil one. For example, we can see that building a warrior for 1 military action would cost 2 resources. Another military action a player can take is to destroy a military unit. Again, it works the same way as destroying any other structure, it simply costs a military action instead. Now my opponent is going to end his turn, but we can see he only has 1 unused military action, so he will only draw 1 military card. As normal though, all of his buildings will produce. It is my turn again, and since it is the beginning of the 3rd round, if we were playing the simple game, one of these events would be revealed and affect all players. But because we are playing the complete game, these events do not resolve automatically. Instead, they only resolve when a player plays an event card from his or her hand as their political action. We will describe this in more detail later in the video. In all cases, after a player completes their political phase, whether performing a political action or not, they must discard military cards from their hand if they have more than their current number of military actions. Like with civil cards, your hand limit for military cards is equal to the number of military actions you have. Unlike civil cards, however, it is possible to draw beyond your military hand limit. You will just need to discard back down to it after your own political action. We have another game in progress farther along than this one. We will jump over to that to show you some political actions and the last remaining civil action possibilities. We are now in Age 2 of a 3-player game where players have more diversified civilizations. It is my turn, and for my political action I will play this brown aggression card. Playing an aggression card as your political action costs the amount of military actions shown on it. We can see that this card has 2 red circles on it, meaning I must spend 2 of my military actions for the turn to use it. When playing an aggression, you choose an opponent to attack by clicking their name. When you do so, you will have an opportunity to sacrifice your units to increase your military strength by their values. For instance, if I sacrificed one of my knights, we can see that they are worth 2 military each, so I would gain 2 strength. The sacrifice token, however, is returned to my yellow bank. In the event you sacrifice an entire tactics group, which are these cards here, you will gain the tactics bonus to your strength. We can see here this tactics card in my area gives me a bonus 3 strength for every group of 2 infantry and 1 cavalry that I have. So if I sacrifice 2 more infantry at this time, I would gain the value of the 2 infantry plus the 3 strength bonus for my tactics card. You may sacrifice as many units as you wish, but I am going to stop here. After the offense makes any sacrifices, the defense has 1 opportunity to play defense bonus cards like those we can see here, and or make sacrifices as well. When a player plays defense cards in response to an aggression, they increase their strength by this top value. As a result, we can see that each of these would add 2 to the defense's strength if they played them. Our opponent is going to play one worth 4 extra defense, however. It is important to note that you can never use defensive bonuses to increase your power when attacking. After both players have had an opportunity to increase their strength, if the defense's strength is equal to or greater than the offense's, nothing happens and the political action ends. If the offense's power is higher than the defense's, however, the offense and defense will gain and lose what is indicated on the aggression card. In this case here, we see the defense would lose a total of 5 resources and food, and the offense would gain whatever the defense lost. An important thing to note about aggressions is the offense can never suffer the penalty, even if the defense ends up with more strength. We can see in this case the defense matched my strength, so when they click I'm done, the aggression will be discarded. Before talking about the final 2 civil actions, I want to cover Pacts, which are another political action option. Pacts are only included in games of 3 or more players, they are not in the 2-player game. During a player's political action, they may play a Pact, which is a blue card that looks like this. To play a Pact, you select if you will be person A or person B, and you select an opponent to be the other letter. The player you offer it to may accept it or reject it. If they reject it, it returns to your hand and your political action is over. If they accept it, however, it enters play like this one we can see here. Each player may only have one pact in their play area at one time, though they can participate in multiple pacts simultaneously. To explain this, we can see that this pact is a solid color in this opponent's area, while it is displayed more faded up here. This means that this opponent is the one who put it into play, and if this opponent later offers another pact that gets accepted, this one will immediately end and be discarded. On the other hand, since this opponent did not put this pact into play herself, she may still play one as her political action on a later turn without affecting this one already in play. Alternatively, another way to spend your political action is to cancel any pact in play that you are participating in, even if it is not one you played yourself. For instance, as her next political action, this player may decide to cancel this pact. With that covered, let's move on to the last remaining civil actions. Firstly, you may play a new technology to your area by paying its cost in science. We can see that the alchemy technology in my hand costs 4 science and I have 8 total, so I am able to pay its cost of 4. If the symbol in a technology you play matches the symbols on ones you already have in your play area, it is layered over them like so. If it does not match any technology you already have, it starts a new column like this knight here. The only exceptions to this are blue and orange technologies, which completely replace earlier versions. Because my government only allows me to have 2 of each type of urban building, I cannot just start building up here because I already have 2 of this type. I can, however, upgrade from a lower level of the same type by paying the difference. We can see that these cost 6 resources each to build, and these below it cost 3. Since I already have yellow tokens here, I can upgrade them by paying the difference of 3 resources like so. You can also upgrade military units in the same manner, except it costs a military action to do so. For example, if I played this cavalrymen technology for 6 science, I could proceed to upgrade my knights to them by paying the difference for 1 military action each. It is important to note, however, that playing a military technology still counts as a civil action. So placing cavalrymen on my board would cost me 1 civil action, not 1 military action. Also, I want to note that the only other military action you can take during your turn is to play a tactics card like this one here. To play a tactics, you click on it in your hand. When in play, a tactics awards you extra military strength for each matching group of military units you have built. Since I have 2 infantry and 1 cavalry, for instance, I get the 3-point military bonus here. If I had 4 infantry and 2 cavalry, though, I would get this bonus again for a total bonus of 6 strength. You can only have 1 tactics in play at a time, so if you play one when you already have one in play, your old one is discarded. Now I am going to play these 2 mineral deposits to show you advanced rules for production. As you upgrade your mines and farms, the values of the blue tokens on them change. We can see this mine here has a value of 1, so all the blue tokens on it are worth 1 resource. On my irrigation over here, however, each blue token represents 2 food. As a result, I actually have 7 food right now. 2 for each of these 3 up here, and 1 for this one down here. If I was to end my turn at this point, I would lose resources to corruption in the advanced and complete games. We can see that it will give me a warning before this happens. If you are playing the simple game, you do not need to worry about corruption. It is not included. Corruption occurs when sections of your blue bank are totally empty at the end of your production phase. We can see that if this area is totally empty, you must return 2 resources to the blue bank. But if up here is empty, you must return 4 resources. If your entire blue bank is empty, you have to pay back 6 resources in corruption costs. Because I would add 3 blue tokens here and 2 here, I am faced with corruption at this time. Another thing to note about production in all game modes, even in the simple game, is you must pay food in the same manner as corruption, as indicated by this yellow bank down here. We can see that this section of my yellow bank is empty, so I must pay 1 food. Since each yellow token up here yields a blue one worth 2 food, I will produce 4 food, but then have to pay 1 back this turn. If your civilization can ever not pay the necessary amount of food, you will lose 4 points. The last part of production to cover has to do with happiness. This is also ignored in the simple game. During the game, buildings and cards in your play area will give you happy faces. We can see here that my completed wonder gives me 2 happy faces, and that is why the 2 on my yellow bank is highlighted with a red square. As sections of your yellow bank become empty, you will require more happy faces to keep all your workers content. We can see that if I increase my population 3 more times, the area beneath the 3rd happy face would be empty. As a result, I would have 1 discontent worker represented by a sad face in my game information box. We can see that both of my opponents have at least 1 discontent worker while I have 0. If you put discontent workers to work, you will experience an uprising and you will skip your entire production phase that turn. To prevent an uprising, you must have at least as many unused workers as you have unhappy faces. We can see that both of my opponents have an equal number of unused workers and unhappy faces, so they would both produce during their turns. If, however, this player ended their turn with only one unused worker and 2 unhappy faces, their entire production phase would be skipped. I am going to undo my turn to show you one special case when playing technology cards. Government technologies are represented by orange cards like this one I have in my hand. Where they differ from all other technologies is there are 2 ways to play them. We can see that there are 2 science costs shown on this card, the big 5 and the smaller 12 in parentheses. When you play a government technology, you can play it just like any other technology card by paying the higher cost in parentheses. To do this, click the government card and then click Peaceful Change. Your civil and military actions will immediately shift to the new values like you had begun your turn with this government, and your turn continues as normal. Alternatively, you can play a government card at its lower cost by declaring a revolution. To declare a revolution, playing the government technology must be the first civil action you take for your entire turn. You cannot take the government technology from the card row and then declare a revolution, for instance. When you declare a revolution, you lose all your remaining civil actions for the turn. You can still take military actions, however. We can see that since I declared a revolution, I have 0 civil actions remaining, even though that was the only civil action I have taken this turn. We can also see that I have gained 2 military actions as a result of my new government. We will now jump over to a final game we have in progress to explain events, wars, ends of ages, and the end of the game. We can see that my opponent has used all his civil actions, and when he ends his turn, the age will end because there are only 4 civil cards remaining in the corresponding deck, but 5 spaces in the card row need to be refilled. These 3 spaces up here need to be refilled because we are in a 2-player game, and these 2 empty spaces need to be refilled because they are empty. I want to note that all ages except Age A Antiquity end when their deck runs out. This even includes the final age in each of the 3 game settings. The simple game only plays through the end of Age 1, while the advanced game plays to the end of Age 2. This is the complete game, so we are playing through the end of Age 3. In the advanced and complete games, when any age besides Antiquity ends, some cards will be removed from play. Firstly, when an age ends, any cards players still have in their hands from the previous age are discarded. For example, this selective breeding I am holding is an Age 2 card, but Age 3 is about to end, so it will be discarded. It is important to note that Age 2 technologies already in play are not discarded, however. My Age 2 coal technology here, for instance, will remain in play. Also, any leaders in play from the previous age are discarded. Again, my leader is from Age 2, so he will also be discarded. Next, any incomplete wonders from the previous age are removed. We can see that I have an incomplete wonder from Age 3, so it will not be discarded at this time because it is not 2 ages old. Completed wonders from earlier ages will also remain in play, as only incomplete wonders are at risk of being discarded. For instance, my Age A Hanging Gardens are not going to be removed at this time because they are complete. Lastly, any pacts in play from the previous age are discarded following the same rules. We do not have any pacts in play because they are not used in the 2-player game. If you are playing the advanced game, those are the only things removed from play. If you are playing the complete game like us, however, each player also loses 2 tokens from their yellow bank at the end of ages 1, 2, and 3. As a result, we know we are going to lose these 2 yellow tokens here. I also want to point out that some tactics cards from later in the game work following similar rules. We can see that my classic army tactics card here has a large 9 and a smaller 5 in parentheses. What this means is when I gain military from this tactics card, I gain the larger value only if all my military units involved are not older than the tactics card by more than 1 age. We can see that this tactics card is from Age 2, so in order to gain the higher value, both of my infantry and cavalry must be from Age 1 or later. This is the case here because my cavalry are from Age 1 and my infantry are from Age 2. However, if one of these infantry was on this Age A card instead, I would only gain 5 strength from this tactics. Events are green military cards that are played secretly to the future events deck in the advanced and complete games as a player's political action. When a player plays one, the top event of the current events deck resolves and he or she gains points equal to the age of the event card he or she just played into the future event stack. For example, since this is an Age 3 military card, I will gain 3 points by playing it. Events from Age 3 award all players points based on various criteria, but events from other ages may affect players differently based on certain factors. Anytime there is a tie when a card effect applies to the player with the most or least of something, such as military strength, the player who would take their turn next counts as having the higher amount. In this case, since it is my turn, I would count as winning any ties. But in a 3 or more player game, if the player to my left was tied with the player to my right, the player to my left would win the tie because it would be his turn next. The only other thing to note here is that in a 2-player game, any event cards referring to the 2 strongest or 2 weakest only affect the strongest or the weakest player. We will now play this event card, and the top event card of the current event stack will resolve. Now that my political action is over and I have more military cards in my hand than the number of military actions I have, I must discard military cards accordingly. When I do so, my turn will proceed as normal. From here I will briefly cover Colonies, and then we will look at the final 2 additions to the complete game. Colonies are green event cards like this one here. Like other event cards, they are played to the future events deck and trigger the resolution of a current event. When a colony is revealed, players will have an opportunity to bid on it in clockwise order, beginning with the player whose turn it is. To bid, players state a military strength and they continue in clockwise order, either raising the bid or passing. Once a player passes, they cannot rejoin the bidding later. The bidding continues until all but one player have passed, and that player wins the bid. The player who wins the bid must sacrifice military units equal to the value of his or her bid in the same manner as sacrificing units for aggressions. Players can also use the bottom half of bonus cards to add to their colonization total. For instance, if I want to bid with 5, I could pay 5 by sacrificing a knight worth 2 and playing this bonus card, which adds 3 to my colonization total. There is an important restriction here, however, in that a player must sacrifice at least 1 military unit to claim a colony. They cannot use only bonus cards and other card effects to do so. In this way, I could not bid 6 and settle a colony using only these 2 colonization bonus cards. I would have to sacrifice at least 1 military unit. That brings us to the 2 card types found only in the complete game. The first is the Air Force, which works like any other military unit, except it doubles the value of the tactics you have in play. For example, my classic army would normally add 9 to my military strength, but because I have an Air Force unit in play, it doubles the strength bonus to 18. I want to note that only 1 Air Force unit can be attached to each tactics group, so if I built another Air Force right now, it would not increase my tactics value any further. If I built 2 more riflemen and 1 more knight though, I would have another complete classic army which could have its bonus doubled by building another Air Force. The other card type unique to the complete game are Wars. Wars are black military cards that can be played as your political action by paying the amount of military actions indicated on them, just like aggressions. Unlike aggressions, however, wars do not resolve right away. Instead, they resolve at the beginning of the player who played its next turn. When a war resolves, the player who declared the war has 1 opportunity to sacrifice units to increase their military strength, followed by the targeted player. Sacrificing units works the same as in aggressions, and while a player's maximum military value is 60, it is possible to sacrifice to increase one's strength for a war or aggression above that. It is also important to note that defense bonus cards cannot be used by either side to increase their strength in a war. A major difference between wars and aggressions is the offense can lose wars. After sacrificing units, whichever side is weaker will suffer the corresponding penalty, and whichever side is stronger gains the corresponding reward. The only other thing to note is that during the last round of the complete game, players may not sacrifice military units during wars and aggressions. They can still sacrifice them for colonization, however. In all game settings, the game ends after all players have had an equal number of turns. A slight difference in the complete game is that all players get to take 1 turn after the 3rd age has ended. In our case, even though my opponent took the first turn of the game, we will both take 1 more turn after I complete this turn, since he has not yet taken a turn after age 3 ended. In the simple game, a final scoring occurs with players being awarded points based on their play areas as follows. They get 2 points for each technology they played, 2 points for each military strength they have, 2 points for each happy face they have, 1 point for each science they produce each round, and 1 point for every food and resource they produce each round. In the advanced and complete games, though, these points are not awarded. Instead, at the beginning of the advanced game, 4 Age 3 event cards are placed face-up in play. When the game ends, players gain points as indicated by these cards. In the complete game, no scoring event cards are laid out at the beginning of the game. Here, the Age 3 events work just like all other events in that only those players choose to place in the future event stack will actually come into play. However, they differ from other events in that at the end of the game, any Age 3 events still in the current or futures deck are revealed, and all players score points accordingly. Any event cards from other ages of the game still in the current or futures event deck will not be revealed at this time. We are approaching the end of the game here. The final situation will be revealed once all seeded Age 3 event points are distributed. At that time, whichever player has the most points wins. Thank you for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe.